a todos. Hello, everyone. We're going to do this panel in English. Take a seat. So, thank you for being here. We'll start by introducing each other, or actually introduce yourselves to the audience. Just introduce yourself and please tell us what is your relationship to Ordinals.
Sure, I can start. So I'm Guzman, I'm CPO and co-founder of Luxor Technology. We are known for building mining pools, especially in the Bitcoin space. We are one of the largest mining pools in the world. We also have an ASIC trading desk. We build derivatives for miners and have firmware for Bitmain machines. And then recently we started experimenting with Ordinals and try to explore kind of like Bitcoin code a little more through kind of like a sister brand that we have that is called Habh, where we've done quite a few cool things in the Ordinal space so far. Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Raphael. On the internet, I'm Raph, the Scooby-Doo. I've been working on Ordinals for over a year now, when it was basically just a GitHub repo. I just saw this Casey, the creator of Ordinals, work on this cool project, and I wanted to work on something in Bitcoin, and I just started contributing. And out of that, we kind of got into a working relationship, and I helped him kind of, bring this into the market and bring it to fruition. And yeah, in the beginning, I remember nobody really cared, and now I'm sitting here like a bunch of people on stage and talking about Ordinals. So I'm very happy to be here and talk Ordinals and see where this panel goes.
I'm Pintos y Testnet, free and open source software developer. Good to see you all again. I was just here one panel ago. And I'm probably on the panel because I broke Ordinals. I made some software called Breaker of JPEGs that introduced an off-by-one error into inscription explorers and crashed one of them for a day. So didn't last very long. They fixed the bug, but I guess I found a bug and exploited it in the inscription world.
Thanks for breaking things. Can you hear me? Good. Perfect. I'm Tomasz. I do create art on Bitcoin by Ordinals. I believe in free speech that Ordinals bring towards the community, towards the experimenters. And yeah, I invite everyone to try and explore the land of Bitcoin and the freedom Bitcoin provides.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's start. I don't know if everybody in the audience knows a lot about Ordinals, so we start about telling them what are Ordinals. Anyone can answer, but I'm looking at you, Raph. Yeah. If you want to begin.
Yeah, I can start. So at the moment, I'm the lead maintainer of the repo and the Ordinals protocol, so I'm very familiar how it works. So the basics of Ordinals is that it's kind of these two ideas. The first idea is Ordinals, which is the numbering of Satoshis. It's called Ordinals because it has every Satoshi has a specific ordering. Satoshis are created when they are mined, so we can know exactly when they are mined. And then we just track them across transactions. And the innovation that Ordinal brings is this stable identifier to Bitcoin. Like beforehand, Bitcoin didn't really have that. So you would always create UTXOs and destroy them. So there was nothing that would persist across transactions. And with Ordinals, you have this stable thing, the single Satoshi that you can track across transactions and then attach anything you want to it. And that's the second part, which is inscriptions. It's a way to very cheaply or relatively cheaply put any piece of data on chain, on the Bitcoin chain, so across 40,000 different nodes. And these two systems kind of work together. So you take the data, you attach it to this Satoshi or this Ordinal, and then you track it across transactions. And the first kind of iteration of what this enables is art and digital artifacts on Bitcoin. So that's kind of the basics of this system and how it works.
Okay, does anyone want to add something to that?
It enables stupidity. That's what it enables. Bunch of people putting monkeys on my blockchain. Get off my lawn. Get your monkeys and put them somewhere else. Then they make transactions more expensive for the rest of us who are actually trying to do real money with this thing. That's what inscriptions do.
I mean, I think Ordinals is a very kind of benign sort of transaction. Like, I think long-term Bitcoin needs this adoption and this like more transactions in the mempool to kind of give miners this very stable kind of income. So I think Ordinals provides in a very like good kind of benign way. You know, it's in the witness. It can be pruned away. It's not so bad, I think, for Bitcoin.
It's a good question to ask our mining friend over here. What have you thought of transaction fees lately?
Yeah, I mean, what you guys just mentioned, 100%. Like from like a mining perspective, our customers essentially what they want is to maximize their revenue. And looking into the next halving and the halvings beyond that, the block subsidy and the security budget for the Bitcoin networks only continue to drop. So like us in the Bitcoin community, we need to figure out ways to keep transaction fees high. Without Ordinals in the last year and a half, we've been seeing that transaction fees represent only like 1% of the block reward. And that's not enough to sustain mining, which essentially provides the security to a Bitcoin blockchain over like a long period of time. And Ordinals have brought a lot of fees. If you look at March, there was a huge spike in transaction fees going to anywhere from like 50 to 100% of the block reward, essentially doubling the rewards for miners. Last week, or like this week, also fees have skyrocketed again with a lot of like Ordinals activity. Just in the last 7 days, there were 2,200 BTC worth of Ordinals traded, and that essentially goes into more fees for miners to continue securing the Bitcoin blockchain. So that's the part from kind of the mining perspective that miners love. They essentially bring more revenue to us for us to continue building facilities, continue securing the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the data, that's also supported. Like when we launched Ordinals in February, there was like empty blocks. It was 1 sat per vbyte. And I think since then, the mempool has not cleared once, or maybe for an hour it has cleared. But like basically, the fees have been sustained for a long time, very high. Let's see if that continues. Like it's an experiment. But the thesis is holding up that that Ordinals do support the fee market and maybe also the long-term security budget of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree. Not everything that some bad things have a good effect, and one of the things that it did that has a good effect is that it's increased Lightning usage, because the on-chain fees being high has caused institutions like Binance to say, all right, we have to figure out a solution for this, let's integrate Lightning, and it helps miners. It helps miners at least in the short term. Yeah. So I agree that that is a good effect that inscriptions have had.
Bitcoin is permissionless, right? It allows you to do experiment, try things with. And if it's that case, that maybe doing inscriptions and doing things on chain will motivate people to think about scaling, or maybe changes the soft forks to ensure that the chain is, let's say, optimized for better use in the future. I think we should try to do it today if it's possible. Maybe it won't be possible 10 years. And I would like to see what you think of that recommendation.
Yeah, I kind of see it as a little bit of a stress test for Bitcoin. Like many systems are being like tested if they actually work. I mean, there's some Lightning wallets that did very inefficient things. I don't know, like Moon Wallet or something. They would always like swap in, swap out, and that business model doesn't work in a high fee environment. So it's also the mempool is being stressed. The mempool is very large right now. It's 1 gigabyte. So there's a lot of like little things in the big structure of Bitcoin that are like being a little bit stressed. But I think a little bit stress is good. It kind of makes people like, oh, really think about what we should work on next and what works and what doesn't work. So, yeah.
One of the things that has made me happy is that Bitcoin has this like self-healing factor, where if fees get too high, or if fees get higher than most people are willing to pay, they'll take their images elsewhere. And that's what I think we've seen happen. I think there's a lot of NFT projects that have decided they're gonna put their image somewhere else, and then they'll just like link to it on the blockchain or something like that. And that's much more efficient. So I'm really glad to see that Bitcoin's fighting back against inscriptions and raising fees for them too.
Are you saying like projects that were previously on Ordinals are now changing to having a link to their picture? Or do you mean other chains do that already?
No, on Bitcoin. I think the BRC20 community is doing this. Very rarely do the BRC20 people put the whatever logo is for their coin on chain. They typically have it on some website somewhere, and they just put the token data on chain.
Yeah, BRC20 is interesting because, I mean, Ordinals and inscriptions were designed as a non-fungible kind of token standard, and now they're building this fungible token on top. And they're kind of, I think they're realizing this doesn't work. But yeah, they've kind of built on top of our software because it was easier, because we enabled it. But I think BRC20 long-term has to think about something else. Like, it makes sense for a token standard not to put all the data on-chain.
It'd be even better if they took it off the chain entirely. Do that on like RGB or Taproot Assets or one of those things. That's
when it's ready.
That would be great, and maybe it's going to work if RGB is actually used and applied in some of these tools. That would be great. But today, maybe that need of transactions BRC20s existing. It's 80% of the blockchain actually at the moment. Like, most of the inscriptions are BRC20s, and one could argue they do not provide anything beneficial. It's not art, it's just speculation. So I think that further validates the need to scale Bitcoin in more experimental and novel ways. So where would we go? I don't know, it's an open question. What would we like to see instead of BRC20s? Yeah, opportunity to explore.
Okay, great, great. I'd like to ask you about, we're going to talk about long-term impact of Ordinals, but I'd like to begin with incentives for miners. There is an obvious incentive that are fees, okay? But I wanted to ask you that if there are other incentives, other things you like. I understand your company is committed and using and even providing services related to Ordinals that are not just mining them, right?
Yeah, so I think also what like Ordinals has shown us is that we might be at the early days of like MEV developing on Bitcoin, which it has had its good and bad connotations on the Ethereum space. And now we are seeing, for example, in the Ordinal space that this Siphon was kind of like front running all of the BRC20 mints over the last few days, essentially bringing all of the BRC inscriptions to a halt. So I think that's gonna essentially require like a lot of like really clever people to start like looking into what like MEV would look like in Bitcoin, and essentially find ways to like mitigate front running. I think that's also going to, over the long run, help increase fees even more, which, as we mentioned before, fees are incredibly important for the Bitcoin security budget, and without a security budget, essentially all of the benefits that Bitcoin bring, they are not going to be there. Because miners essentially provide the immutability that the Bitcoin ledger has.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask you all about if you believe that there is a net positive impact of Ordinals for the Bitcoin network, especially thinking about the long run. We don't know if this is just a fashion that will fade, that will evolve into something else or whatever, but if you believe that in the long run, this have a positive contribution to the Bitcoin network as a whole or not, and why?
Should I start? Okay. I think what Ordinals shows, so Ordinals and inscription in and of itself are very primitive technology. Like this is not like very big brain stuff. This is not crazy cryptography. But the success of it really shows that there's this latent kind of demand in the market to do stuff on Bitcoin. People want to develop on Bitcoin, people want to come back to Bitcoin, people want to use Bitcoin. So I kind of think what Ordinals kind of shows is, and what it also brings, is a lot more mindshare back to Bitcoin. Be it developers, be it funding, like be it actual Bitcoin core work, like all of this has to be funded by something, and the more kind of mindshare and the more kind of attention there is on Bitcoin, the more like of these positive effects you can get. So I think, or I hope, that in the long term, kind of Ordinals will have been this catalyst to bring this back to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I sort of joined that ideology that a lot of people want to experiment on Bitcoin, want to try to do things on Bitcoin, and we can presume that the altcoins were always a testnet, and with things that currently are created on top of Bitcoin, we might actually see a massive involvement of different individuals, developers, and community coming back to it, trying things that they were believed or were told that they can't do, maybe natively on chain, and maybe not, if not possible, go ahead and maybe support some form of solutions that were previously abandoned by disabling certain OP codes. As you, I think, a handful of times alluded to, the technology of Bitcoin could be expanded, could be played with, and maybe the wave that Ordinals bring towards Bitcoin is going to push the exploration back on track.
Oh yeah, and to add on that, I think nobody really cares what we put on the blockchain and like what we think about this image or this other image or this text or this other thing. Like Bitcoin doesn't care. The rules of Bitcoin allow for this. It's part of the standard rules of the Bitcoin blockchain. So like I think, or like if I like Ordinals, but what I think is extremely important is that over the last 9 months, there's been this single thing that brought more engineers and people to start thinking about how to continue to build on Bitcoin, and also a bunch of users that otherwise wouldn't be looking at Bitcoin as their desired blockchain. And that to me is extremely net positive.
Compromise, or to me it's like a compromise. I got into Bitcoin because I want to make a better money for the world. And I don't think inscriptions are doing that. I think they're making Bitcoin a worse money for the world. And if that's true, if that thesis is accurate and it's actually making Bitcoin worse, then there is a change I'd like to see in Bitcoin, which is change it so that we don't have inscriptions anymore. And if we do that, then I think we'll be making Bitcoin better money once again.
Well, I mean, to add on that, Satoshi Nakamoto itself inscribed on the Bitcoin blockchain in the very first Bitcoin block, adding that reference to the New York Times 2008 bankruptcy. So like, inscribing arbitrary data on the blockchain is not something new. This has been done since the very beginning of Bitcoin, in the very first block. And there's people that have used OP return codes to add arbitrary data to the Bitcoin blockchain. Even every single mining pool tags their blocks with a few bytes, identifying themselves as the finder of that block. And that's arbitrary data that doesn't need to, or it's not required to be in the Bitcoin blockchain, which is essentially the same as the inscriptions. I think the main issue why people are pissed is because they don't like what people are inscribing. I mean, and that doesn't really matter. Bitcoin rules allow for this. Nobody really cares if we like the monkey JPEGs or whatever that may be. It's just part of the Bitcoin rules, and they literally allow you to do this.
I mean, for me, I resonate with your argument that Bitcoin should be this very like hyper-efficient, super optimized financial layer. But I think to get there, you have to convince people that Bitcoin has value. And making art in and around Bitcoin, I think, can help people understand that it is something valued. Like the analogy, probably not a perfect one I would take here, is with gold. So gold is something we all see as very sound money, but gold is also made to use as jewelry, and people value gold also because they see it as, oh, look, this is a nice piece of jewelry that I can wear. And I think ordinals and inscriptions can also bring that for Bitcoin, to be like, oh, there's this really cool art that's created in this substrate of Bitcoin, and then they will be like, ah, maybe, okay, then I can also use this as money, and I trust it as like this store of value. No, I don't know.
I think Bitcoin is art. Bitcoin's like the pyramids or the Grand Canyon or something. It's this paragon of a beautifully well-constructed design machine that's designed for finance. And inscriptions, it's like taking a bucket of paint and dumping it on the pyramids and saying, look, now it's art. It already was art. Now you've made it worse.
I disagree, but yeah, it's also a good analogy.
It's graffiti a bit. You can call it graffiti on.
It is graffiti. Graffiti used to be like this bucket that nobody wanted, but now there's like art pieces selling for millions of dollars that are graffiti, you know? Like graffiti turns into art at some point.
In a positive way, preserving memories or you know, your favorite animal, connecting it with the ordinal theory to a Satoshi that was minted in 2010 and ensuring that the memory of your animal lives in this sort of chain that is the most decentralized, secure, and trustless medium in the world is personal decision. It's permissionless. You can do that. Sure, some people can say that it disrespects the property of sound money, but I think it enhances the property of sound money and allows to, yeah, brave new world.
Permissionlessness is great, but it's not a good reason to do something stupid.
I agree, but I think it's a balancing act, I agree. So, for example, I see BRC20s as this bit of a cancer on top of ordinals, and ordinals, you see ordinals as this cancer on top of Bitcoin. So this is kind of, you know, it's this layer on top of each other. But I think
we'll both be part of the Alliance Against Cancer.
Sorry?
We can both be part of the Alliance Against Cancer.
Yeah, Alliance Against Cancer. I mean, everyone's against cancer. I think ordinals is probably benign, whereas BRC20 is malignant. I see your point, but I think overall it brings more positive effects, at least at the moment in the situation where we are, where like Bitcoin has a little bit been stagnating and like had been kind of maybe a little bit forgotten. It brings back attention and brings back, you know, developers and resources to build out Bitcoin. And even Bitcoin Core has a lot of warts and edges that have to be maintained. Like if you go deep into the code base, there's a lot of things that like are broken, like, and nobody really knows about it because nobody has been kind of been able to spend time in that, like deep down in the code base. You need these kind of long-term funding for this kind of huge project, this huge like structure you want to build. So I hope through ordinals, through the tension, we can kind of channel some of the degeneracy, some of the bad stuff into something good, and make Bitcoin the kind of sound money that it is, and hopefully future of money.
Okay. I'd like to ask Super Testnet if do you see some solution to the things that you don't like? Is it just tell them to go elsewhere? You mentioned RGB. Perhaps you can suggest something else. Do you have any ideas of how this situation can change?
In my experience, people tend to go to places where there are good developer tools and where there are welcoming environments for that. And I think some of those, part of the reason they're in Bitcoin is because they found the Ord community a welcoming environment and some developer tools. So they went where that was available. But as they've discovered, Bitcoin's not a great place to do this. It's a very expensive place to do this. So my hope is that as more tools like RGB and Taproot assets come out, and I hope that developer communities grow up around them that are very welcoming, that show how to do this in an off-chain way, and that more developer tools come so that developers will go there as well. And so that's my hoped for solution, is build a better place for it, and then perhaps developers will go there.
Okay, and now I want to ask Raph, do you see, for example, RGB as a competitor, or perhaps can you think of trying to move there, or perhaps to move to Lightning somehow, or to change radically your technology to contribute to that, or there's not interest in the immediate following months to do that?
So yeah, RGB is very complicated and has been kind of always promised, but never really was delivered. Maybe it will come out I hear they want to bring out something by end of year, and Taproot assets is a subset of what RGB enables. And I support it. Like, I think it makes sense to offload as much data off-chain as possible, especially for financial transactions and these kind of hyper-efficient things. Ordinals encryptions were just designed for a very specific use case, which is like this digital artifact that's on-chain that gives you the provenance of saying, my piece of data is on-chain, look, here it is, and then it's kind of, it has a nice story, it has a nice narrative if you put your art on Bitcoin. So it was designed for a very narrow case. So I think it really makes sense to have stuff like RGB and Taproot assets, and I hope like those things get built out and yeah, can kind of maybe coexist with ordinals and inscriptions. But I think ordinals and inscriptions, the data, especially for inscriptions, it has to be on-chain. That's kind of the core of what makes it a digital artifact. Yeah. Okay,
we have a couple of minutes left. I would like to ask you all guys, how do you see the future of Ordinals, or what do you expect for the future? If you can take like 30 seconds each to provide this answer.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we'll find ways how to scale speculation away from the chain. So artists that believe that in the ways of creating art in Bitcoin's blockchain and preserving forever have the chance to participate. Same with document freedom of speech, making information there. That could be a question that could be tried to be removed from the space. So I see there are a lot of technological advancement that the core protocol is doing and the layers on top. So seeing these sort of becoming more used over time I'm looking forward to.
My answer is simple. I don't see a future for inscriptions.
Okay. For me, I hope inscriptions and the attention it's getting gets funneled in the correct way to further Bitcoin, to further its cause. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to, what I'm working on. Yeah, I'm happy to see other protocols to compete, Taproot assets, RGB, and just see nice art created on Bitcoin, see the culture bring back, the attention, the funding, all of that. So yeah, looking forward to the future of Bitcoin.
And then lastly, for me, I think it's, I'm happy to see like more activity on the Bitcoin blockchain. As I mentioned before, I think it's extremely important that there's more people transacting on the Bitcoin blockchain to keep driving fees up, because that's important for the security of Bitcoin, especially going to the next halving and the ones beyond. So yeah, I just hope that more people come to Bitcoin, they keep building on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not perfect. We need to keep improving and building the Bitcoin ecosystem. And Ordinals is just one of those things, and hopefully there's going to be more things that continue to add value.
Okay, we're on time, so thank you everybody, and thank you for listening to us.